So ever since I started doing lighting workshops and creating YouTube videos, there's been one style of lighting tutorial that you guys have asked for repeatedly. And that is, how do you use mixed lighting to create portraits like this? And honestly, I can't think of a better topic for episode 3 of How I Got the Shot. So today we're drinking Hins or Heinz or something like that, however it's spelt. But it's a lager and it's tasty. Mixed lighting portraits can seem somewhat daunting, but if we break it down a little bit, you'll find they're actually quite easy to create. Now there are a few things that we need to understand before we jump into the behind the scenes and start going through the light setup. Just different things that you need to know in order to actually create one of these portraits. Now the first thing is you need to actually shoot these in a controlled environment. Now what that means is actually shooting in an environment where you can control the amount of ambient light in the room. So if you have a room that's got bright overhead lights that you can't turn off or a bunch of windows that you can't shut out, you're not going to be able to create one of these portraits. Now the reason behind this is that we're going to be using a long exposure and using our camera movement to create those light tracing effects. Now, if we have a lot of ambient light bleeding into the room, we're not going to be able to create those light effects as everything's just going to become overexposed. Now, the easiest way to find that exposure is to make sure that we've cut out as much ambient as we can. Then we make sure that none of our constant light sources that we're going to be using within the photo, as well as our flash, none of those things are actually turned on. From then, we take our camera and we put it into the bulb setting. Now the reason behind that is that I'd like to be able to control how long I actually keep the shutter open for, and it's usually around 2 seconds. So once we have this and we can hold down our shutter for a couple of seconds, release, and let that frame take, what we need to do is find an aperture setting that will actually give us that black frame. Now I recommend starting around f8, and typically if you take that and then you let go, you should get a completely black frame. If not, try f11. And if at f11 you're still not getting a black frame, there's probably way too much ambient in that room. So for the image that we're working on today, in my studio, I had my camera set to ISO 200, which is Fuji's base ISO. Then I had the shutter speed at around 2 seconds, and when I set my camera to f8 and took a frame without any of the strobes or the lights on, this is what it looked like. A completely black frame, and that is exactly what we're looking for. So now that we have a base exposure of f8, we need to meter our lighting to match that so that our camera and our lights are actually talking to one another properly and giving the proper exposure. Now, if you don't know how to meter light or anything like that, I will link up here another tutorial that I have that covers all of my studio lighting techniques and how I meter light and where I position it. I highly recommend that you go give that a watch, then come back to this one. But for those of you who understand exactly what I mean by that, let's jump into the studio and get into the behind the scenes. So here we are in the studio, and I'll take you through a tour of the lighting setup and explain exactly what each light is doing. Now this portrait was created using a 3-light setup, and I'll start with my main light, which we said at the beginning of this video was metered to f8. The modifier on there is the ProPhoto Large Deep Umbrella. Now one thing you'll need to know is that the modeling light is actually turned off on the main light, and the reason for that is because we'll be using a 2-second exposure, and we want the main light to freeze the model while we are moving the camera around to create the light trail effect. Now if the modeling light was turned on, that creates a bunch of ambient light on the front of the model during the long exposure, and therefore losing all of the shaping and freeze frame effect from the flash. The other 2 strobes placed behind the model are using 7-inch reflectors and have the modeling lights turned on, but these lights are not actually firing any type of flash. They're simply using their modeling lights at full power to create the constant light source that I'm using to create the light streaks. Any constant light source could be used to create this effect, be it a lamp or a flashlight, whatever else you have on hand. In front of those back rim lights are large V-flats that are flagging or blocking the modeling lights from flaring into my lens when I move the camera around so that I get a light streak effect and not a blob of light in the final image. You could also control this light spill using something like a grid. As you can see, every time my flash goes off, I'm moving my camera in various directions. Every direction will give you a different look, so up and down versus side to side would be much different. I also like my model to remain as still as possible so that the movements of the camera move the light around the model versus the model becoming blurry within the movement. So now that we've seen the lighting setup, let's jump into Capture One and do some color grading and some initial retouching. So here we are with our raw, straight out of camera image, and there's a few different things that I'm going to do here in Capture One. The first being that I'm going to convert this to black and white using my carbon style. Now once I have that set, I'm going to come in and I just want to focus the light just a little bit more on her face. So the easiest way for me to do that is to come in here and just grab one of the gradient masks. Now if I draw this out and just feather this in a little bit, and I want the mask to follow the direction of the light. So I'm just gonna curve that up and place this right over top of her eye. Tighten this up just a little bit. And then I'm gonna come in and just drop the exposure a little bit. And as you can see, it just focuses that light just a little bit more. Now, what's actually happening as well is I'm losing a little bit of the light trails that we fought so hard to create. So to bring those back, I'm gonna create another layer. Then I'm gonna grab my paintbrush tool. And from there, I'm just gonna start painting in over top of everywhere that I see the light trails. And with this mask, what we'll end up doing is just punching up the clarity. So once I have that set, come into my clarity, hit the punch, and just start amping that up. And as you can see, it starts to just make those light trails just a little bit more visible here. So if I turn this off and on, it just gives it that light trail effect. We don't lose it inside the gradient mask. There, that's looking great. Now the last thing that I want to do is actually just add a little bit of punch to her eyes. So again, I'm going to create another layer, and still using my paintbrush, I'm just going to come in and I'm just going to paint just a little bit into the bottom of her eyes. And then from there, I'm just gonna bump up the exposure a touch. I'm gonna bring up my contrast a little. And again, just with the clarity, I'm gonna bump that up a touch. And as you can see there, you can even bump that up maybe just a touch more. We zoom this out, if we turn this off and on, it just adds a little bit more punch to the eyes. Now that's all we're gonna do here in Capture One. I'll see you guys in Photoshop. So here we are in Photoshop, and we're just gonna use a couple of tools just to clean this image up a little bit. Now the first thing that we're gonna do is come over here and grab our healing brush, and we're just gonna come in and just remove a little bit of this dry skin that's just around the side of the model's mouth. Not a big deal. Then we'll just come up here, there's just a little bit of dry skin on the forehead. But outside of that, she's got basically flawless skin. Now there's just one other crease mark here that we're just gonna get rid of. And again, we're just gonna draw over top of that with our healing brush. And that'll do a nice job of just making that disappear. And then really the only other thing that we have left is just some of these different skin variations. And the easiest way to take care of those is to use dodge and burn. Now the first thing I'm gonna do is create a local dodge and burn layer, and it's just a really quick action. I'll include it in the description below. The way that you use this is you just run the dodge and burn action. It creates a burn and a dodge layer. All you have to do is make sure that your brush is selected, that it's set to white because your mask is set to black. Then set your flow to around 3 to 5%. Then from there, all you need to do is come in and just start painting away the dark areas with the dodge, or burning in the bright areas with the burn. And just basically all you're looking to do is just smooth out the skin tones a little bit, rather than running, a Photoshop action like the portraiture plugin or something like that, which basically just smooths everything out a whole lot and just makes the skin look really plasticky and fake. This is a great way to make your images look really well retouched, makes them look natural, makes everything, all your skin pores and everything like that are left intact. Yes, it does take more time to do it this way, but the end result is much, much better. Now, rather than you guys watching me dodge and burn this entire image and getting all of this skin to, essentially look nice and smooth, I've already created a dodge and burn layer. I'll just show you real quick this little bit that I just did and how quickly you can actually start to smooth the skin in. But I'll just show you guys here. I've already created a layer for the local dodge and burn, which if I click this on, you can see how it cleans everything up and just makes everything look that much smoother, that much cleaner. And if you come in here, she's still got all of the skin pores, everything like that. It looks super natural. So after we've got our local dodge and burn done, I like to go in and do a global dodge and burn. And the way to do that is again, just to run the dodge and burn action. But this time I'm gonna come in with the burn first, and I'm just gonna start painting in a little bit of the shadow areas. And basically what I'm doing is just helping to contour the image a little bit more and just kind of give an overall global effort to bringing in the details and the shadows and the highlights in the actual image itself. Now again, when you're doing a global, it's a little bit easier to come and just view the image in its full size and just start to kind of shape things out. Now if we come in here with the dodge, we can start to smooth out the shadows a little bit, put a little pop in the eyes. Basically all you're trying to do is just smooth everything out so that you still have all this contouring, all this detail. It just looks a little bit more natural. And of course, again, with the dodge, you can come in here and you can make the highlights pop a little bit more, put a little bit more emphasis on the collarbones, into the shoulders, different things like that. You can also come in and just highlight different areas like the actual light rays themselves and just put a little pop into those. Little bits here and there that it didn't pick up when we were doing it in Capture One. Little areas that you just want have a little bit more snap in them. And again, I'm not gonna make you guys sit here and watch me do the entire image, but I'll show you here real quick, just the before and after. It just adds a little bit of contouring. But if I come in here and I show you, so this was the local dodge and burn, and then this is after the global. So again, it's just everything smoothed out just a little bit more. Again, I'll show you the before and the after, and it's not a massive difference, but it's enough just to give the image its final polish. And again, this is what the final image looks like. And that's it for episode 3 of How I Got the Shot. Now, if you guys did like this video, give it a thumbs up. I'd very much appreciate it. And if you want to see more of these types of videos, hit the subscribe button. If you guys have any comments about anything or questions, that's what the comments box down below is for. And as always, I'll see you guys again very, very soon. Cheers.